Ariana Grande opens up on one of her most talked about fashion phases and says it was never just about style. In a recent edition of Vogue's Life in Looks series, the singer, actress, and former voice coach talked about her signature 2018 look of thigh-high boots and oversized sweatshirts. The style came from a deeper and more emotional place, she explained. Looking back at photos from the year, Grande described it as a very strange time in her life. She disclosed that she was dealing with serious trauma and personal loss, which is why she tended to dress comfortably and securely as she went about her life. She asserted that she could hide herself when needed thanks to her big clothing. Grande explained, "I always wanted to hide away in something really cozy because I was processing a lot." She continued by saying that at the time, she simply didn't have the mental capacity to think about fashion. Instead, she reached for whatever was most practical, often donning a jumper carelessly. But the boots gave her a little confidence boost in the middle of everything else she was hauling. Following certain events that altered Grande's life, she went through a phase of wearing a lot of hoodies. In May 2017, a terrorist attack during her performance in Manchester, England, resulted in 22 fatalities and hundreds of injuries. After the tragedy, Grande reportedly opened up about her anxiety and PTSD, according to People. She took a little pause from her tour before returning to Manchester to perform a benefit concert in memory of the victims. In a message to her fans that went viral later in 2018, Grande said that the incident will leave her speechless and filled with questions for the rest of her life. That year, she had yet another devastating loss when her ex-boyfriend Mac Miller died of an accidental drug overdose in September 2018 at the age of 26. In a 2019 Vogue interview, Grande denied public reports about their relationship and described her anguish as all-consuming. She underlined that strangers couldn't see the years of labor, love, and exhaustion they shared. A few weeks after Miller's death, Grande and her then-fiancé Pete Davidson ended their engagement, bringing an agonizing year to a close. In hindsight, Grande reinterpreted the clothes she wore at the time as a survival strategy rather than a source of self-expression. For her, what many saw as a trend was simply a daily means of subsistence. Despite their extremely personal beginnings, Grande's massive sweatshirts quickly became well known in the fashion business. According to List's 2018 Year in Fashion report, as reported by Page 6, the primary cause of the 130% rise in searches for oversized hoodies was fans trying to mimic Grande's now iconic lamp shading style. The analysis found that rising searches for brands like Vera Wang, Burberry, and Reebok further cemented Grande's influence in high fashion and streetwear. What started off as a comfort decision became one of the most famous celebrity fashion moments of 2018. Her voice swept the charts. Her photo was widely shared on social media. Her name was at the center of pop cultural discussions. Despite the glamour, the accolades, and the continuous attention, admirers who paid close attention noticed something minor. Ariana Grande almost always wore big sweatshirts. Her body was consumed by them. Her hands were covered by her sleeves. Hoods were pulled down, creating a soft barrier between her and the world. It looked like a fad at first, simply another effortlessly fashionable trend from a singer known for donning enormous sweaters and thigh-high boots. But beneath the surface lay a much more profound story, one centered on survival, loss, and trauma. Years later, Ariana has talked candidly about that time in her life and the awful reasons she turned to wearing baggy clothes for psychological defense rather than style. When fashion becomes a barrier of protection, clothes are rarely just clothes. Many people believe that their clothing choices represent their level of self-security. In 2018, Ariana Grande was going through one of the most difficult periods of her life. Despite everyone's expectation that she would keep smiling, singing, and producing hit after hit, she protected herself by wearing big hoodies. They offered comfort when everything else failed. They separated when the closeness became too much. They gave her barely enough time to carry on. Ariana later stated in interviews and remarks, "It was about protection. Protection from examination. Protection against memories. Protection from a suddenly exposed version of herself." A year of trauma and loss. To understand why Ariana wore certain outfits in 2018, you need to understand what she was carrying. After the Manchester Arena bombing during her performance in 2017, which left 22 people dead and hundreds injured, Ariana experienced great trauma just a year earlier. The incident not only changed her career, but also her attitude on life, sense of security, and neurological system. In the months that followed, Ariana persisted with bravery that many admired. She returned to the stage. She coordinated the fundraiser concert for One Love Manchester. She discussed how love overcomes fear. But healing is not a linear process. By 2018, the weight of unresolved trauma, loss, and emotional exhaustion had begun to manifest. In the same year, her close friend and ex-partner Mac Miller died, which was another terrible sorrow. The loss had shattered her. Suddenly, Ariana was grieving both publicly and privately, while millions of people followed her every move. The need for okay feelings. That moment was more painful because it was expected of her to keep her cool. Fans wanted music. Interviews were requested by the media. The industry wanted productivity. Furthermore, social media continued to scrutinize her body, appearance, and feelings. Oversized sweatshirts were used as a way to show dissatisfaction. Because Ariana wore loose-fitting clothes, she wasn't trying to hide from fashion critics. Rather, she was trying to hide from being noticed because she didn't feel complete. The softness of the fabric, the loose fit, and the familiarity of hoodies provided her with a sense of comfort when her inner world felt chaotic. In her own words, she was not trying to make a statement. She was trying to survive. Body image and emotional vulnerability. Another highly personal factor in Ariana's decision was her body image. Extreme stress, despair, and anxiety can cause the body to feel foreign. Ariana has been open about how trauma affected the way she saw herself physically. Wearing big clothing allowed her to avoid the constant criticism of her appearance that she had been subjected to since she was a youngster. In 2018, her figure was being analyzed for both beauty and meaning. Fans conjectured endlessly about her weight, health, and emotional state. Each group garnered media attention. The Hoodies muted that sound. They gave her permission to exist without explanation, without making any judgments, without feeling compelled to be feminine or self-assured when she wasn't. The lifeline of convenience instead of hiding. Ariana used hoodies as a means of grounding herself. Traumatized people often long for soft textures, comfortable clothes, and familiar items. By relaxing the neurological system, these sensory delights might offer a slight sense of control when everything else seems uncertain. Oversized hoodies provided that comfort. They restored her sense of home, of quiet moments away from the spotlight, of having something that didn't require any work on her part wrapped around her. At a time when everyone was expecting so much, her clothing offered something. Performing in the face of pain 2018 was especially notable because of the contrast between Ariana's public performance and her personal hardships. That year saw the release of Sweetener and Thank You, Next, which many fans now view as emotional turning points. Incredibly raw, honest, and unpolished was the music. Songs talked about love, grief, loss, and resiliency. On stage, her voice was strong. Offstage, she retreated into gentleness. Oversized hoodies filled that void. They allowed her to switch between the performance and the individual without losing either identity entirely. She could give everything she had to the public and still save something for herself. The general public misunderstands at the time. A lot of people dismissed the hoodies as a fad or a marketing ploy. Fashion blogs analyzed the look. Critics debated whether it was intentional marketing. Few recognized it as a coping mechanism. Ariana later reflected on how misunderstood that moment seemed. Even if people admired her authority, they didn't always see her weakness. Although they praised her work, they didn't always acknowledge the cost. The tale the hoodies told was still beyond her ability to explain. Developing the capacity to talk about it, as time passed and healing began to take root, Ariana found the right words to express that stage of her life. She began discussing PTSD, mental health, and the physical impacts of emotional trauma more openly. In 2018, she acknowledged that she often felt disconnected from herself, overworked, and numb. The oversized hoodies were never meant to be fashionable, she explained. They are related to safety. Looking back, she honors the time instead of romanticizing it. She is aware that their choices allowed her to endure an unbearable circumstance. Growth without erasure. Over time, Ariana's style has evolved. She experiments with silhouettes, loves elegance, and allows herself to be seen in new ways. However, she is not against the hoodie era. Instead, she views it as part of her story. Healing is not the same as acting as though there was no suffering. When needed, it involves understanding the motivations underlying our actions. Those sweatshirts represent perseverance to Ariana. They represent the version of herself that persisted in spite of her own collapse. The importance of her integrity, Ariana Grande's explanation resonated deeply with her fans because it gave words to something that many people go through but rarely articulate. Many people use clothes as a coping method for emotional pain. Oversized sweaters during grief, hoodies during worry, and layers when feeling exposed are just a few examples. Seeing a well-known star acknowledge that fact reinforced countless silent struggles. Her honesty served as a reminder to her fans that strength isn't always a glamorous quality. Sometimes it seems like putting on your softest item to get through the day. Redefining strength in a culture obsessed with resilience as a spectacle. Ariana offered a different perspective. It's not always a sign of strength to stand tall. Sometimes it curls inward to protect what's left. Sometimes comfort is more important than expectations. Sometimes it's wearing an oversized hoodie and refusing to explain yourself. By revealing the painful reasoning behind her fashion choices, Ariana turned vulnerability into power. A part of the story, not the whole story. 2018 will always be a significant year in Ariana Grande's life, not because of the sweatshirts, but rather because of what they represented. They were a response to unimaginable pain. A quiet rebellion against authority. A reminder that even the most intelligent people are only human. Photographs from that era show fans more than just fashion. They see survival woven into cotton and fleece. They see a young woman making the most of what she has.